Hello everyone and welcome. I think we're ready to begin. My name is Ed Arnold and I'm Vice President of Products here at Leverage Point. I'd like to welcome all of you to another one of our monthly webinars of thought leadership in value-based strategy. Sponsored by Leverage Point. Leverage Point provides the only software solution for value-based pricing. We offer a cloud-based collaboration platform that links all cross-functional team members involved in building and executing a value-based strategy that changes the way companies create, communicate, and capture value. You can find out more about us from our website, leveragepoint.com. Now, during the webinar, if you have any specific questions or comments, please feel free to enter them in the right-hand panel in the questions section, and later on, we'll respond to as many of them as we can. Now, also, we encourage you to complete a quick survey upon exiting today's webinar, because if you do, you'll be eligible to win a copy of the book, The Pricing and Profit Playbook. Speaking of which, let me introduce today's speaker. Our presenter today is Joanne Smith. Joanne Smith is the author of The Pricing and Profit Playbook, and this is an excellent resource for any executive tasked with improving profitability. Joanne will definitely be sharing some insights from that book today. And she, as you can see, has an impressive background as an experienced B2B executive with over 20 years at DuPont, where she was Corporate Director of Marketing and Pricing. And currently, Joanne runs her own consultancy where she assists B2B companies on their transformation to better long-term profitability by improving their pricing performance. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Joanne Smith. Joanne, take it away.
Thank you, Ed. I'm just delighted to be able to talk about a value-driven culture today. Let me jump right in on it and change the chart here. Just one. If we really think about it, and most of us have probably been in the pricing world for quite a bit, we hear from sales, from leadership, whether it's overt or inadvertently, that price just can't be their top priority. It's always something like they must grow share, they must grow, they've lost accounts in the past over price, or they're worried their customer loyalty will suffer over the long haul. The bottom line is, I believe so many leaders and sales folks believe that price and customer loyalty or growth can exist together, that it's an oxymoron. You can have one or you can have the other. But like what I believe is there are two sides of the same coin, and that currency is value. When we put the umbrella over everything as being value, we can then drive both the growth in customer loyalty and the price and profit that we need. So to me, the real oxymoron here is the smart fool. And the smart part is creating value, and the fool part is not being willing to get paid fairly for that value. So if we think about the last decade, pricing has certainly gotten more and more challenging, from faster product development, the very volatile economy, global competition, smarter procurement, e-commerce, the internet. All those things have resulted in changing customer values, and certainly buyers are just very much stronger at the negotiation, as well as they have access to information to do a better job of comparing alternatives. Put that in with the normal challenges our internal businesses put us under, which is hitting perhaps quarterly objectives, the volume share goals that we have. It becomes very difficult. And so to me, the counterbalance, or the thing that pulls both sides of this together, is the building of a value or a profit-driven culture. So I could have substituted in my mind profit for value if I so chose, because I think they're driving the same thing. So to me, that's a culture that has a real passion for creating value and an equal passion for getting fairly paid for that value. Then taking those profits, reinvesting for further value creation so you can build your customer loyalty, which obviously drives growth. So if I just try to build that up and talk about this in a slightly different, more pictorial way, we're talking about that creation, that this culture that creates value, gets fairly paid for it, understands the price-volume trade-off types of decisions that maximizes profit, reinvest those profits for innovation, and the underpinning of all that to truly be both value-based and profit-based is to have segmentation and differential management. Because we know that there are certain segments out there that will not value things equally to other segments. They may or may not be willing to pay for it. And if we're really going to be good at value and profit, we really need to invest in the segments that are willing to pay for our extra value. We can't really afford to have all the resources it would take to delight every segment out there. We do need to choose. And so my guess is most all of you on the phone understand segmentation and how that plays in here, but I'll just do a 30-second on this just to make sure we're on the same playing field. When I talk about segmentation, I'm talking about what I'm showing here is 3 different customer needs-based value segments, like the price buyers, maybe a technology buyer, a value buyer. And the y-axis here is, of course, their willingness to pay. So a price buyer who's not willing to pay much, those are where we strip down a lot of the offerings. Maybe there's not technology development and no services and standard products, potentially longer lead times. And all the way up to a value buyer, and if that value happens to be technology, we'd be offering technology development, the right services, application development, custom and standard products, shorter lead times. So that's the way we would differentially manage in a culture here that's very value-driven. Now let me just back up and talk about the experience at DuPont in both price and customer loyalty and why I believe it proves, certainly to myself and hopefully to you, that in fact you can simultaneously drive these. On the left-hand side is that graph that you see, and that's actually 15 years of DuPont pricing quarter over quarter. And you can see in that first half of the chart, that was before we started our pricing journey. And you can see many more quarters we actually lost some level of price than the number of quarters where we gained price. But midway through that, we started, and you can see 6 years of data where we just increased price quarter over quarter continually with only 2 quarters that we missed, and that was in the 2009 recession, where even in that year, we had profit uplift from our pricing move of $200 million. So a little bit less than the roughly billion that we brought in many of the years previous to the recession, but still very good pricing. Now, what was happening with customer loyalty through that same time period? Well, first, let me say when we started pricing, the large majority of the businesses in DuPont did not even measure customer satisfaction at all. So we were actually just a couple of years into our pricing journey when we started, and I brought in the Net Promoter Score as the kind of main metric we would use. And that is the leading metric for customer loyalty in the B2B world. And just to put it in perspective, you can have as high as 100% or as low as a negative 100% in a Net Promoter Score. Essentially, you're just asking the customer, would you recommend us to a colleague? And if it's a 9 or 10, that's a highly loyal customer, and we subtract from that anybody who is a 6 or below who we think are potentially dissatisfied customers. And that's how we get the score. So in B2B, the average is about 5 to 10. And when we started this, DuPont was above the average slightly. But as we continued to work on our pricing, we also continued to work on the customer loyalty experience, and we actually grew that roughly 30%. And we had a number of businesses that moved into world-class, meaning greater than 50, which is a very tough feat in the B2B world to do that. So we were able to move both of these. So let me just, I tapped a little too fast there. Let me just say, so why do I keep talking about customer loyalty here? And I want to actually do it from this chart versus just talking about growth. I think of customer loyalty as more, as a bigger and better term, because it actually, from studies, would say if you have loyal customers, you are twice as likely to get price premium. You have a 31% higher share of wallet, so there's our growth, as well as it's the more profitable customers. You have 14% higher retention, and so that means less internal cost. And then you have a 50% greater ability to penetrate with your new product. So it's just a more robust term than just growth alone. So if we take that and we say, okay, customer loyalty, how does price play into customer loyalty? Well, if we look at those drivers of customer loyalty, about half of them have to do with your physical offering and your brand. About half has to do with the customer experience, and only 9% is price. So price is a very low driver of loyalty, and I'll tell you in DuPont, where most of the other numbers were very, very consistent with what we felt across our businesses, price was actually even lower a driver of customer loyalty. So we talk about customer experience. Those are things like responsiveness, reliability, ease of use, relationship, selling process. And then the bringing of new insights can really create a strong customer experience. And an example of that would be just what Leverage Point is doing these days, right? Just bringing you this webinar is a form of Leverage Point bringing to their customers and potential customers new insights. And that is something that helps to drive loyalty. So this is just a chart here that is illustrative of the drivers of customer loyalty. It's been disguised. It is not the exact DuPont numbers, but it is very directionally close with what we saw across major strategic business units. And so you can see in that the gray bar, which you can barely see, is that drove price. The orange bar was the customer experience, very large, and then the product innovation was in blue. And so more of our specialty kind of businesses had a slightly higher product innovation than customer experience, and the more commodity ones had a part of product and a big part of customer experience. So once again, we see in these businesses that lower price was not something that was going to give us the loyalty and the growth and the things that we wanted. But if you then say, what about dissatisfaction? Could it have been a reason that we might have lost customers or driven them away? And so this is, again, illustrative, and you can see that once again, the customer experience dominated when customers were dissatisfied. Occasionally it was the product, and most of the time that was relatively low. We did have a couple of cases where brand new major product shifts were changing, that we had some major product issues or that showed up in one or two businesses, but predominantly customer experience. Now the gray bar in price does show up here, and on average, maybe just a little more than 20%. So it's there, but it is not in any way dominating the customer satisfaction or dominating customers' reasons for being dissatisfied and potentially leaving. So again, oxymoron that price is the key thing that drives your customer's decision to buy or not buy. So with that kind of as background, when we think about trying to do value selling, we want to be sure that our customers fully perceive our value. And the best way to do that is really to quantify your value versus the next best alternative. That's that economic value. And that's what Leverage Point, as you're well aware, does, helps you do extremely well. I just want to point out that there are other kinds of value that add into the customer experience, like emotional value, strong brand, the buying experience, relationship, trust, future innovation, risk of switching, or societal value, if you have green products and things along that line. So as we think about quantifying our value, we want to quantify as many of these things as possible. And sometimes those emotional and societal values you can quantify. At other times they may be too difficult. In all cases, I say we need to make sure if they exist that they get into the selling collateral material as you talk about your value to your customers, because they will have an ability for you to drive the loyalty, to drive the price and the growth. And I maybe just back up and say, in Leverage Point, their sales collateral material certainly has the ability to take not only all the things we can literally quantify with dollars, but it also will allow you to put some of the things that are true value but are harder to quantify into your sales collateral material. Now, if we back up and we say, how similar is the goal of value pricing to customer loyalty? And this is very simple definitions I've used here, but look just how similar they are. On the value side, of value pricing side, refining the offering to meet the customer needs and setting a fair value price versus customer loyalty. Refining the offering and customer experience to better delight the customers for increased loyalty. So similar that if you put that value-driven culture on top of these, you can melt those together. You can simplify what the organization is trying to do so it feels as one initiative and not potentially two competing initiatives. Even when we look at the approach that we would take on either one of these, you can see how synergistic they are. They both start with identifying values and needs, getting at segmentation by values, refining the offering for the customer experience. Then, of course, value pricing, we make sure we quantify it so we're fairly paid. In both cases, you need to communicate and really sell that value. On the customer loyalty side, we put a lot more effort in making sure you truly deliver the value after you've sold it. And then in both cases, we need to measure performance. Did we really get what we had planned and expected? So again, they can easily be put together because they're synergistic under one more simplified umbrella, and one that I think has a more compelling business case or driver. So how do we make that culture actually happen? If you look at my title there, obviously the first thing has to happen is that your leadership, your business and sales leadership, have absolutely got to perceive that if they chose to drive a value-driven culture, that there would be real benefits, that they would literally grow their profits and their volume in order to get their active support. That's no different than when we sell products to our customers, right? They have to perceive that the value is real in order for them to be willing to buy as much and at the proper price. So the first step is to be sure you have a compelling vision and a very motivating business case. And I think I've shared with you some things today that I hope are building the business case in your mind on why it makes sense for a business to go after a value-driven culture. The other sort of things you can do is educate, bring in success stories, examples. I showed you a little bit of the DuPont success story. Vendavo has many case studies and success stories where their clients have done use their tools to better sell value and get paid properly for value. But there's books, external speakers, all of that helps to get the perception that this is real and a worthy journey of going after. And then doing things like small pilots just to get the early win and to share those very broadly so people can see that it works. And I think here the easiest way to do some of that is often a new product comes out, and you can easily do the value quantification and use the value collateral and selling tools to see how that really drives your ability to get higher price. One other thought in this area would be doing a current state assessment. And in a minute, I'll actually show you an example of this. But this is where you're really looking at your current state opposite what is good, what would a good value-driven culture look like? And we're thinking cultural aspects, strategy, people, process, and systems. And across all of those elements, where do you stand now? And is there a big gap? And if filling that gap is really going to help you with your profits. Now, once you get leadership on board, you know, that can be challenging enough in itself. But then to really make change happen, you have to do a couple other things. And probably the most important element of change is how well you resource the change. So you need some level of somewhat dedicated resources to help drive value pricing and the things one needs there, or to drive the customer loyalty, the measurements and the improvement in customer loyalty. And they need to be not just functional people, not just good pricers or good at customer loyalty, but they also need to be able to drive change. They need to be leaders that can do change management, because at the end of the day, a culture means you're going to have to influence top leaders through sales, marketing, customer service, and really anybody that touches the customer experience. So we have that in there. We need to develop the skills in sales and marketing, because ultimately those are the ones that execute the value selling, the value pricing, create the customer experience. And then we need to think about how our incentives match and align. Do they drive a value-driven culture? And really you want to think about that from your business objectives all the way down. I've just highlighted sales here because that is such a critical piece where so many of our sales are compensated strictly on total revenue or total volume. And to really help to drive value pricing, to drive a value-driven culture, there needs to be some other components in that variable compensation, like a profit-based component, or yet even a third component that might be something that drives value-driven behaviors, like the number of deals they've done using value-based tools, or the number of deals they've used that have used case studies that prove the value equation. And then the last piece that I'll talk about is really systems. To get the right process and the right systems in place that really, the systems that lock in the process, you know, the good process and disciplined process you want, and lock in your ability to execute consistently over the years. So you know from leverage point side that those are systems that will help both quantify the value and drive the process to allow you to easily do that, but it also drives the process that allows you to very easily build the value-based selling tools, the collateral that can easily be customized and used with your sales force. On the customer loyalty side, there are definitely systems that allow you to both quantify loyalty as well as analyze that data in a Pareto sort of fashion so that you can begin to take better, longer-term moves to improve it. So those are, at a quick high level, how one thinks about beginning to move the culture. Now, I promised you I'd give you like a little very kind of basic illustration of a maturity model assessment. And this is just, again, a simplified one. But on the left-hand side would be what does a low-value culture maturity look like versus the right-hand side, which is what you might aspire to. And you can see I've used a 1 to 5 kind of range here. But on the right-hand high maturity side, in the culture leadership, you're seeing the passion, the urgency, the courage, if you will, to go after both value pricing and improving that customer experience. The pricing orientation is obviously value and use-based. The selling orientation is both strong value-based selling approaches, but it includes a purposefully designed customer experience that drives yet further value. The pricing organization, as well as the customer loyalty resources, as I've already mentioned, in both cases you have some form of very strong, dedicated resources to drive the functional change and the change management across the organization. Marketing and sales, you've gotten them up so that they have been trained and have the competency to do a strong value delivery, strong value pricing, value selling, creating a value-based experience. So they're the execution arm. And then as we've talked about, there's the value pricing process and systems, such as we see with Leverage Point. There's customer loyalty process systems that need to be in place and be strong and be broadly used where people can see the loyalty scores as well as getting down to actionable items. Segmentation, it needs to be at that high level, as I've mentioned earlier, the differential management really based back at the customer needs and creating value and collecting value at that point. And then, of course, this whole value, pricing, customer loyalty, the whole value culture needs to be linked and aligned to your business and marketing strategy so that it is part of the same drive for the entire organization. So that's a quick and dirty kind of way one might look at an assessment. So, here in my 25 minutes, I'm just going to wrap this up so we can, get towards questions. But for me, I think building a value-driven culture is it's a smart thing to do. It simplifies something that brings both loyalty and growth to price and profit, using that higher level of currency. The value is the umbrella. And then I just say, for me, the oxymoron here, or the mad wisdom, is folks that would invest in customer loyalty, right, that creation of value, but don't have the wisdom, right, to create value pricing. And I'm saying invest in both sides of this currency to really win in the marketplace with the most profit. So with that, Ed, that's really the charts I wanted to cover.
All right. Well, thanks, Joanne, for an excellent presentation. And we do have some time to take a few questions. So, folks, this is a great opportunity to put forth any questions you may have about a value-based culture to Joanne. Just put that into the questions panel on the right. And by the way, some folks are wondering about whether they can get a copy of this presentation, and the answer to that is yes. We will make that available for everyone who joined us today. And also, just a quick reminder to fill out that exit survey when you do leave today. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how Leverage Point helps companies establish and support a value-based culture. And so, we're a cloud-based application, and that allows companies to scale their best practices in collaboration. And that, of course, begins with a central searchable database of all their key customer data that product, marketing, and pricing teams can use to put together what we call value models, and from that devise their product strategy as well as their go-to-market marketing and sales materials that, in turn, customer-facing teams use in their value-based selling process, and very important, to build that customer loyalty that is so powerful in the data that Joanne shared with us today. And because this is a platform, you're capturing that field feedback in real time so the entire organization gets smarter after each and every customer meeting. So using a platform technology is a real powerful way to align multiple functions around a common value-based culture. And especially for larger global organizations, there's no better way to scale it than using this type of approach. Now, of course, you'd expect me to say things like that, but I think what's more compelling is what customers say, and these are actual customer quotes from Leverage Point users. You'll notice that they speak to the ease of use, having standardized data and definitions. We talk about collaborations in terms of teams communicating better across regions and across functions, and it's very much like social media tools. Of course, it's extremely efficient. The companies are able to apply a value-based approach to a much larger set of their products and do it much faster and much better. And then, of course, the bottom line results here, which can be quite profound. So here, a 2 to 4% increase in gross margins. So some food for thought there about scaling a value-based culture. And at this point, what I'd like to do is take some questions. And I see some questions coming in right now. And so, Joanne, the first question here, if you're ready. Do you have a before and after analysis for DuPont based on the comparative chart you showed on pricing maturity?
In terms of where our maturity, yes, certainly. We actually started at what I would have thought in the pricing side of a level 1. Very reactive, just really more of a volume share driven culture. And so as we went through that period, and I showed you there of about 6 years, all of our 50-some different businesses moved at different rates, but the majority of them would have been in what I would have called roughly a level 3, with some of the better ones breaking into lower level 4. And the rare ones still hanging at a high level 2. So we definitely moved, but it is a multi-year journey for sure.
Okay. And maybe a question that kind of builds on that is, how quickly can you get started? So you said multi-years, but I know you had a slide that talked about getting started quickly. So maybe to elaborate on that.
Yeah. So just because it takes multiple years to get significant improvement does not mean that you don't get immediate and continual improvement along the way. So for sure, and whether it was pricing or whether it was customer loyalty and the efforts there, we saw some great dollars associated with them year after year after year right from the get-go. So from, I mentioned doing pilots as an example as a great way to see little things on the value pricing side. New products are so easy to do because there is no preconceived notions out there. People need to know it to sell in your own organization. Really welcome that. And you can get your hands around. They're small, bite-sized pieces, but you can very quickly see how that can turn into real dollars. So I would just say, get on with doing it. Get on with, while you're doing it, building the business case, the vision, to get leadership on board. So as you begin to show them these pilots, it's really solidifying in their minds that this is the right thing to do, and they get behind you with allowing you to probably resource it more effectively going forward so that you can really accelerate the change.
All right, so great answer. And so I guess what you're saying is you don't have to start everywhere at once. Really important to do those pilot programs, pick the right ones there to demonstrate the viability of it, the proof of concept, and then move on from there.
Oh, absolutely. Because one, you could not try and nail every part of the change all at once anyway, right? You can only take on bite-sized pieces, and you begin to add in and move varying elements of change through time. So yes, I'm a big proponent of just do it, get started, and then share those early wins broadly as you use that to leverage into the ability to do more and more.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned new product introductions as one great place to start. Are there other places where you've seen where you can get more a quick impact on a value approach in other situations?
Well, for sure, right? If you were to look at your portfolio of products, if I just think on the value pricing side here a minute, you can pretty easily bucket your products into highly differentiated, all the way down to highly commoditized. But if you go into that bucket of highly differentiated and you pick larger selling products, one that has material revenue behind it, you can absolutely go in there and do your value quantification, and should be doing these to move and price those properly. And I maybe just would say I'm working with a client now, and actually they found as they did some of that, they actually had a couple of their big products that they were overpricing, and so they had very little volume share. When they actually did their calculations, they needed to lower price, and when they did, they actually grew volume. So we're always talking here about what is our fair value that we're capturing so that it really allows us to grow and it doesn't stifle our growth, but pays us fairly.
Okay. Another question just came in, and this is referring to your analysis on customer loyalty and the customer experience. And just sort of rephrase it, it's saying that, it sounds to me like you have a solid marketing group there. Can you share the top 2 or 3 takeaways or lessons to get marketing and sales behind your quest for value pricing?
So, yeah, I think to get behind value pricing, it's the same as a value-driven culture. Sometimes I think it's easier for them to see it on how it will actually help them by driving both growth and price. Whenever we can elevate and say, all we're doing is we're talking about creating value and getting fairly paid, right? If they think about this as almost a separate knob of we're just trying to crank the price as high as we can, that's not near as compelling as them understanding just looking for fair price. And the more a customer can understand in a quantifiable way the value, that gives us not just price, it gives us growth. So that's why I say that higher level umbrella, I think they can connect to more easily. And then the actual examples. Certainly you can share what other companies have done, and that helps to get them moving and open to trying a pilot. But almost any time somebody does a pilot with a specific product, even if it's little, they can begin to see how, in fact, that did lead to smarter pricing, and that can see how it led to better conversations that the sales folks can have. And you just build on those successes, and with each one you get more and more of their hearts involved.
Okay. Another question says, you mentioned a number of things that drive change. How important are system changes in driving success?
Well, I think for any kind of business that is got any kind of complication, unless you are a very, very simple business, you're going to need the kind of systems that it requires. Many of us have thousands of products. How do you deal with thousands of products without systems that allow it to be very simple and easy and effective? Because your sales folks, unless they're different than ones I'm used to, they're very, very busy, and we need to be able to put this data in front of them, this value-based thoughts, in a way that is easy for them to both get and to use. And without systems, I don't think you're certainly not going to get a cultural change that really allows the sustainability and the real building of that particular muscle, in my in my estimation. You can get started. You can do things the hard way, put a lot of manpower on it, but to really make it stick, I think you need systems.
Okay. I think that wraps it up for the questions today. And to everyone, we have Joanne's contact information there. So if you'd like to follow up with her directly, I'm sure she'll be glad to hear from you. Again, we will be sending out copies of the slides to everyone who participated today. And I want to give a brief announcement about our webinar coming up in March. It's on March 26th, and our speaker will be Dr. Stefan Liaozu, who will be talking about cross-functional collaboration to boost the value culture. So I think it makes a great sequel to what we talked about today. So great presentation, and you'll be getting email information about that event very, very soon. So with that, let me say thanks everyone for watching, and thank you, Joanne, so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks everyone again, and until next time.